Well, it's still climbing. We're almost at 50. When I hit the record button, you'll hear a message that the recording is in progress, and then we'll get started. We'll give it one more minute. Okay, I'm going to start the recording. Hello and welcome everyone to our first Protect Ohio Children monthly recorded webinar. We're glad you've joined us because our coalition is the best source in Ohio to find out about indoctrination in the schools. When anonymous whistleblowers give us information about comprehensive sex education, critical race theory, social emotional learning, and other racial and sexual harmful materials being presented to minors, we expose it. I'm Diane Stover, the State Director of Protect Ohio Children, and I'm going to help moderate this amazing panel of Protect Ohio Children board members. I'll be watching your questions through the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen, and as time allows, we'll take a few questions. At the end of the webinar, there will be a survey you can use to give us feedback. So at this time, let me turn this over to John Stover.
Thank you, Diane. I'm John Stover, president of Ohio Value Voters and also a board member of Protect Ohio Children. I'd like to talk to you today about an extremely important bill that was passed by the General Assembly last month and unfortunately was vetoed by the governor. This is House Bill 68. House Bill 68 was a combination of actually two bills. One was the Save Women's Sports Act that was discussed the last General Assembly session, the 134th General Assembly, and it was introduced by Representative Jenna Powell that would prohibit biological boys, men from competing against girls' women's sports. There's very, very few people, no matter what spectrum you may be on as it relates to politics, and people that we speak to as an organization, that want to see biological men competing against girls. And, you know, we have a situation where we've seen throughout the country where scholarships have been eroded for many of the, young women. We've also seen major injuries occur, as what had taken place roughly 10 years ago, where a MMA fighter ended up fracturing a woman's skull where she was put in the hospital. So that was one provision of House Bill 68. The other provision had to do with the matter as it relates to this gender dysphoria. It was called the SAFE Act. The SAFE Act basically would keep the children under the age of 18 years and younger from this experimental surgery whereby you have children having their body parts cut off because of the, once again, gender dysphoria that is taking place in our country. You know, one of the things that I would urge people that are viewing today to do is go to ohiovaluevoters.org, and on the right-hand side, you'll see something that our organization, Ohio Value Voters, put out earlier this week in opposition to the governor's veto. You can pull that up, and there'll be a number of articles there. There will be testimony from Ohio Value Voters and myself personally, as relates to the two bills that ultimately were consolidated in House Bill 68. The thing that that is extremely, extremely important that we need to do is we need to urge our legislators, the Senate leadership, House leadership, to override the governor's veto. And we have the opportunity to do that. The House, I understand, is going to be looking at potentially taking this up, as well as the Senate. But we need to make sure that the vote that was cast to pass House Bill 68, those same members are doing their part to override the governor's veto. Many other states throughout the country, Florida is one that I can think of, and many others have legislation that prohibit these type of things from occurring in their state. There is, and once again, if you go to ohiovaluevoters.org, you'll be able to pull up the video that we have also there that a young lady, when she was 13 years of age, she started on puberty blockers. Ultimately, at age 15, she had her breast removed. And she was on Fox to talk about the fact that she had met with the governor, told her story about detransitioning back to the female gender. And as she stated, and our organization believes 100% that this is a psychological problem when it comes to anyone that feels that there's a juvenile that feels that they are of the opposite sex. They were born in the wrong body. I've said this many times, and let me just say it for the viewers here, that if you have two children, two 13-year-olds, one comes to the conclusion that they're a wolf or a cat or some type of animal that's referred to as a therian dysphoria. You don't have a child psychologist recommending that they start transitioning to that animal. They receive some type of psychological help. And we should be looking at it the same way. And this young lady, Chloe Cole, who you can view in this Fox interview, she basically stated the same thing. She said, I should have had psychological help when all this occurred in my situation. So once again, we urge you to contact the Senate leadership, House leadership. The House Speaker is Jason Stevens. He can be reached at 614-466-1366. 614-466-1366. Senate President Matt Huffman, his office, 614-466-7584. I urge you to call those two numbers and just express the fact that we need to see House Bill 68. We need to see leadership moving forward to override the governor's veto. And thank you for doing again. And I turn this now over to Linda Harvey of Mission America.
Thank you, John. I'm Linda Harvey. I'm president of Mission America, and I'm also on the board of Protect Ohio Children. And what I want to talk to you about today is sex education in Ohio. And just a quick background that we have since 1999, an abstinence until marriage emphasis requirement of all school districts in the state. And that bill, that law is 3313.6011, if you want to look it up in the Ohio Revised Code. But the one thing which is wonderful, because every responsible survey out there and research out there shows that abstinence in teen years produces the best outcome for kids all the way across the board, academically, socially, physically, sexually, morally, and spiritually. But we also know that many school districts are not teaching abstinence, an abstinence emphasis. And the law says that the emphasis shall be abstinence until marriage. It also, schools are supposed to teach the harmful effects of teen sexuality and also the harmful effects of unwed pregnancy, the option of adoption, and several other items. And so we know many school districts have been teaching comprehensive sex education, which is the Planned Parenthood, pro-abortion, pro-gender transition, condom-based approach that is highly risky, medically inaccurate, and puts kids at risk and normalizes teen sexuality. And so several years ago, the Ohio General Assembly passed an amendment to the sex education law requiring that the Ohio Department of Education do an audit annually of the school districts. And that's what's been happening. So the second audit just came out. The first one was marginal at best because a lot of schools didn't even report what they were teaching. But the second one came out, and it was very thorough as far as everybody seemed to, all the 611 school districts reported. But what happened was then the question is, are they compliant with the law? Well, you know, when you apply certain standards and you're not really watching what's going on, yes, we, you know, miraculously 607 of the 611 school districts are compliant with abstinence until marriage. And so we can all just relax, right? Well, no, we can't, because when you look at the details, they are not compliant. We did our own analysis. And what we found is that just over 200 school districts are clearly compliant with a genuine, authentic abstinence focus and not this high risk, endangering, condom focused comprehensive sex ed. And over 50 are teaching that non-compliant, high risk, comprehensive sex education to kids and then in their schools. And the rest, several hundred, are uncertain because of how they reported and how I would have to say sloppy the Ohio Department of Education's application. If you want to see the details, I would urge you both protectohiochildren.net and our website at missionamerica.com. And what the other aspect that the Ohio Department of Education, ODEW it is now, Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. Well, the other thing that they did not do according to law, they should have been much more stringent in their oversight, is that the law also, as it was revised a couple of years ago, now says that there needs to be written parental permission if a school district is going to teach something other than the clear abstinence focus. And so, okay, now if parents got together and schools got together and said, yes, we're going to teach condom-based pro-abortion teaching in middle school, which is highly reckless, but okay. But you have to get written parental permission. That means not just a blanket email that goes out just saying, hey, guess what? Unless you tell us no, which is opt-out, an opt-out strategy. Unless you tell us no, we're going to go ahead with this. They're supposed to get written permission to opt in. The Ohio Department of Education and Workforce had the parental notification in their audit, but not written parental permission. So a lot needs to tighten up on this. But if you'd like to see your school district and where it falls, and then if you have different information or additional information, please notify me from the missionamerica.com website. I'd love to know about all this and glad to take your comments and questions. So thank you very much. And I now turn it over to Jonathan Broadbent.
Hey, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for joining us for this inaugural kickoff. I am a chair and territory lead of Protect Ohio Children in the North, which is roughly the top 1/3-ish of Ohio. One of the things that we've been tracking really since the beginning is this proliferation and spread of pornographic books. And it seems to me, back when I was a kid, we could clearly define and agree upon, pardon me, I happen to be fighting off a bit of a cold, so forgive me if I struggle with my voice a little bit here. But we used to be able to agree upon what pornography is. These days, there's all this gray area and confusion about pornography, and we're struggling to try and define it, which is sort of mystifying. But the spread of what, in my book, are clearly pornographic material is spread all throughout Ohio and the United States. But we've got some good guys fighting back. We've got, in mentor schools in particular, there's a fight that has been kind of a tug of war, and the definition of pornography and what it means and whether or not it actually exists in the schools. And there are some good guys. There are some white hats in tracking pornographic books and materials. Pay close attention to a statewide initiative launched by a gentleman by the name of Dakota Sawyer, who has been tracking these pornographic books. Again, it's mystifying to me that we're at this place where we have to sort of battle about how we're defining pornography. A lot of it, and just to sort of illustrate the point about what pornography truly is, we see examples, and I still see them to this day, of people going into their local school board and reading material from books that are offered to their children and being muted and silenced by the school board, not being told that they can't read that material, which is just sort of bewildering. But there are some people that are working really hard to try and put daylight on this, spotlight those books, and encourage parents to get rid of them. Because at its core, one of the key components of manipulating children and making them feel unstable, at which point you can sort of pursue further indoctrination, is to attack some foundations of their belief system. And part of that is their understanding of their own sexuality. There's a lot more to that I could fit in a longer conversation, but over the past few years, I personally have taken it upon myself to look into the history of different forms of manipulation, including the sexualization of children, because you know that expression, there is nothing new, it's all happened before and it's history repeating. And I do believe that's the case. So looking back at some of the historical sexualization of children, it over and over again throughout history has had catastrophic effect. Just looking at the near term, it makes sense for us parents to be vigilant about what our children are finding in school libraries. So as I mentioned, take a look at some of the fight that's taking place in mentor schools. That's in Lake County, just to the east of Cuyahoga County, which is where Cleveland is. There's some great examples there. And locally, they have a gentleman by the name of Brian Massey formed something called Lobbyists for Citizens. They're, I think, a really good example of communities organizing to find, uncover, define, and then expose pornographic materials. So between those two, Dakota Sawyer at the state level and a representative example in a local district, that being mentor schools, Brian Massey and Lobbyists for Citizens, there's a great blueprint for us to really step into addressing the pornographic materials in the schools. And then if you're like me and want to dig a little bit deeper, please do take a look at some of the history of including that type of material in schools and exposing children to it. It's a long history, it's really damaging, and we should be doing everything in our power to help stem the tide and get rid of that stuff. Get them back to understandable books and materials that are not pornographic. And one last thing, just to coin an expression my wife uses, no children have been harmed by lack of exposure to pornographic material. I'm going to turn it over to Cathy Pultz now. Thanks.
Thanks, Jonathan. I am Cathy Pultz, and I'm on the Protect Ohio Children board, and I represent Central Ohio. And I'm going to mention we have 2 lawsuits in our area. Currently, Hilliard City Schools have a group of parents who have sued the district for hiding information from parents with the gender ideology. Currently, the district has filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit. So right now, they're waiting for the judge to rule on this case. And if you want more information, go to hilliardparents.com. And another group called Parents Defending Education has filed a lawsuit for some families in the Olentangy local school district. They are claiming that the district violates students' First Amendment rights by requiring students to use preferred pronouns. And you can find information there at Defending ED, so DEFENDINGED.org, and then search Olentangy. And I've been asked, how do I learn more about what's going on in schools? And I would say to anyone who wants to pay attention to schools is that you should go to your school board meetings every month and really listen to what they're saying. And when you go online, you can find their agenda and they have something called a consent agenda where they just vote on it. They usually don't have much discussion. And a lot of that, you can see where they're spending their money, what negotiations they're doing with the unions. And I have found out a lot of information that way. So it's sometimes hidden and we don't pay that much attention, but that would be my big recommendation for people to, if you really want to know what's going on. And so that's just my quick update for Central Ohio, and I'm going to turn it over to Darbi.
Thank you so much, Cathy. So I am a member of Protect Ohio Children, and I am on the board, and I represent the South region. I am also a member of the Board of Education for the Lakota School District in Westchester, Ohio. So I will be discussing the fact that regions, that districts in this area and throughout the state are getting in trouble for inappropriate behavior with minors. And we believe, and I believe, that this is due to inappropriate conversations being allowed in the school setting regarding sexuality and sexual preference in the school system. And then this can potentially lead to sexually charged conversations, and then that opens the door to inappropriate behavior. Something I would like to mention about a local school district in our area, Forest Hills, just recently had to pay $100,000 in a settlement to parents who protested a culture of kindness resolution that had been previously passed about 18 months ago. And it banned race-based and gender identity training for staff and curriculum. So this was started by two parents who were lawyers, and they brought 3 other families into the lawsuit. There was a lot of harassment for the board president. She was sent glitter bombs and inappropriate toys in the mail. She did not run for her second term, but there was a lot of pressure by the left and even by the attorneys to stop the distraction for the students, stop confusing the students and creating a divisive environment. So the board, unfortunately, settled for $100,000, and that was divided between. And I think this touches on the subject. Really important for boards to understand that they have the authority to protect the students, and sometimes the attorneys that are hired by the school district tend to be a left-leaning organization. And so I think when you are a conservative majority, I would advise school board members to find a more conservative leaning attorney group to represent the board. And just because the attorneys have represented the school district in the past and it's always been that way doesn't mean it has to be in the future. And I think it's really important to know that you can fight for your students. And what is it worth? What is your students' future worth? And are you going to just to give up and settle, or are you going to fight? And I think that we tend to get scared because it's going to cost money. But when we're fighting for our students and we're fighting for what's right, what's it worth? And then I would also like to discuss Lakota and Scioto County. These school districts have had teachers that have been investigated and charged with criminal behavior pertaining to minors. Lakota had 2 previous teachers who had moved on to other school districts. One was sentenced for having sex with a teenager and was forced to resign and register as a sex offender. She started a relationship with a junior high school student that was 14 years old. Another teacher who had been at Lakota previously but was suspended for failing to maintain appropriate student-teacher boundaries was later charged with child pornography and faced second-degree felony charges. And then last year, Lakota West Choir director resigned after being questioned about a picture of him shirtless, discussing or talking to a student over FaceTime. And then Scioto County just recently had a teacher that is facing charges of sexual battery for engaging in sexual activity with a minor. And I think, Jonathan, you brought forward the books, and I think it's really important to look at the books and the literature that are in our school district and allowed. And some of the books that I've been in Lakota School District, this one talks about, this book contains sexual nudity, sexual activities, alcohol and drug use by minors, and excessive frequent profanity. And then another one that is cataloged in the library currently says This book contains explicit sexual activities, including sexual assault, child molestation, violence, including self-harm and suicidal ideations, profanity and derogatory terms, drug and alcohol use. So again, that reinforces the fact that if we're allowing those books in the school district and children are reading them and they're topics of discussion, what the behavior that comes from that is exactly what we are seeing in the news. And then at our next meeting, I would like to discuss the Children's Hospital and their role in this, in the education system, in their high school, in their school-based health clinics, who have counselors perpetuating the lie that a boy can be a girl and a girl can be a boy. And some of the information has come to us from a parent in Cincinnati that has gone through this experience herself, and the school district helped transition her children without her consent. So that's all I have for you today, and I'm going to turn it back over to Diane.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. As our audience can tell, there's a wealth of knowledge and wisdom amongst this group of leaders here in this webinar. I'm going to bring up a slide. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, this slide is going to give us just a recap of what we've heard today and also some announcements. But before we do that, I thought I would take a few questions for our panelists. This is about House Bill 68, so this will go to John. Is House Bill 68 also going to keep men out of women's locker rooms and bathrooms? And this person has personally been exposed to this on the OSU Fitness Center in New Albany. And he had reported it. John, do you have an answer for him about the bathrooms in the bill?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Diane, and thank you for the question. Yes, this bill will, in fact, do its part to see to it that safe spaces by women are protected, locker rooms, restrooms, showers, etc. And, this is once again extremely, extremely important. I mean, we've had situations throughout the entire country. Loudonville School District in Virginia was one that I can think of, where one day a boy that decided that he was going to look upon his gender identity as being that of a girl, came to the school as a girl and, basically assaulted a female in a ladies' room. So yes, these are things that the bill will address also. It's once again, it's a good bill. It's a no-nonsense bill, and this is why we're urging the General Assembly to override the governor's veto. One last thing I would mention, the governor is talking about drafting some administrative rules that he wants to put in place to be in lieu of House Bill 68 that he vetoed. The problem with administrative rules is that they can be changed at any time by this governor or by a future governor. So Ohio Value Voters and Protect Ohio Children is urging the General Assembly not to accept these administrative rules from the governor, but to pass House Bill, actually the veto, override the veto of the governor as relates to House Bill 68.
Thank you. A couple questions are coming through about the Ohio Revised Code number that you referenced. Linda, could you clarify the number of that bill for sex education being taught in the schools? Linda Harvey.
Yes, it's 3313.6011.
Okay, thank you. And this question, I'm not sure about this. How will the passage of issue 1 impact sex education in Ohio? I'm not familiar with that. Anyone? Okay, Linda.
Well, the passage of issue 1, because it allowed, it's going to allow information about abortion to it's mandated that that information be out there for children and for anybody of any individual, is how they phrased it, and that no entity is to block that information or that access. To me, that what that says quite clearly is down the road we will see someone address the abstinence law that we have and decide that that it is too restrictive. And we're really hoping that we can address this at the legislative level. It's in some way to shore up the protection of minors so that kids are not forced to learn about all of the different ways that you can have sex in various directions, open condom demonstrations, and an open advocacy of abortion in schools starting in middle school, which, again, the comprehensive sex education schools that are teaching that's what they're doing. And so we need to shore that up and prevent that from happening. But yes, that is a danger, one side danger. And of course, parental permission about all of that is out the door. Parents are going to be bypassed as far as the sexuality issues at school and in every other way because of issue one.
Thank you, Linda.
Hey, Diane?
Yes, go ahead.
Could I chime in also? One of the things that came up regularly in discussions about issue one in the lead up to the vote was the possible alleged ability of an adult to take a minor into an abortion facility who may not be their child. And it's my understanding, just to sort of interpret loosely, I'm not a lawyer. My understanding is that this bill allows an adult, maybe a soccer coach or a gym teacher or any adult who's not the parent of the child, to take a child into an abortion facility. If that's the case, that's something to really pay close attention to and make sure that we're aware of. John, you may know more on that. What are your thoughts?
Yes, the General Assembly as well as the courts are going to get involved with defining, some elements of issue one. One thing that I would say is that, the fight continues. Whether it's, we're fighting children in the schools, when it comes to the concerns that we have and what we're seeing, we're going to continue the battle that not only our organizations, but then also people throughout the state will continue to address. And, so, a lot of it is to some extent unknown, but, we are going to continue that fight.
Okay, we have a question. This will be the last question. Two more questions, excuse me. I guess this would be perhaps for Jonathan or anyone. Which pornographic books are popping up in the elementary schools most often in Ohio? I'd like to ask my daughter's school if they're being used in her school.
So, yeah, you mentioned me. I'm I guess sort of relative to our conversations, I find myself taking lead on discussions of pornographic books and defining them. And just to reiterate, it's just so frustrating that we're at this place in society where we're having to sort of rehash what has always been an accepted norm, a definition of pornographic material. So just setting that aside for a moment, and I don't know how much I'm going to acknowledge the pushback from the extremist left, trying to redefine what pornography is. There are some, I don't know that I'm going to specifically say that I've seen the bluest eye in elementary schools, but I have seen instances of that in middle schools. That's one to look out for. Also, and I believe, if memory serves, if you go to Ohio Roundtable, I think you may find an Excel spreadsheet that was created by Dakota Sawyer, who I mentioned earlier. And that's got sort of a rating, and I believe there's some information in there I don't know that it's exactly current and complete, but it's a pretty good starting point that illustrates what libraries have which books and gives an indication of what people are objecting to in that material. For instance, there's one, and I believe it was The Bluest Eye, where somebody has actually gone through and page noted. They've made notation of which pages that includes which material and excerpted paragraphs. And boy, oh boy, that's some pretty wild stuff in that one. And then there are a bunch. This book is gay comes to mind. I don't know that I know a lot of titles off the top of my mind, but I think you're at a great starting point, which is asking the question about. Pardon me, really struggling with my voice today. Starting to ask the question about which books are there and are they pornographic? And there are some resources. I do think a few searches, starting maybe with the Ohio Roundtable. As I mentioned, Brian Massey, Lobbyists for Citizens is his group. I know he's got some social media presence. You may find some resources through them and resources in your community. One last thing, and this has been a big push for years from Protect Ohio Children. It's not enough, I don't believe, for us to find out and solely work on protecting our families. We are our brothers and sisters' keeper. If you find a group or find your way into creating or helping to administrate a group in your community, when you find that information, please share it. And if you find any graphic examples, please share it with tips@protectohiochildren.net. Send in the tip on the website, anything that's into the tips line, and please do share with your community.
Thank you,
I hope that
Jonathan. I'd
helps.
also like to just let everyone know that if you go to the protectohiochildren.net website, there's a tab resources page. There are some links to some resources that identify these harmful books. There's off the top of my head, one of those links that you can go to is there's two of them on there that are extremely comprehensive that will give you those book names you're looking for. One of them is takebacktheclassroom.com. So check that out on protectohiochildren.net on the resources page. There's a lot of very important information there. So we're going to take one more question. Let me just scroll down here. DeWine just signed executive order banning transgender surgery. We knew that press conference was happening this morning. What kind of reaction might we have to that with banning the transgender surgery?
Let me just jump in on that one, Diane. Once again, we appreciate the fact that the governor is attempting to do something now where he's sat on the sidelines for 3 years while this legislation was being discussed in the General Assembly. As I mentioned earlier, the issue with anything that the governor will do as far as administrative rule is concerned can be changed by this governor upon the last day when he leaves office, or it can be eliminated in its entirety by a future governor. So we need to have this placed into law. This is why our organization continues to be in support of House Bill 68. We need to see the General Assembly act, and Ohio Value Voters this week urged the General Assembly not to enter into any type of agreement with the governor regarding any of these administrative rules that he's coming forward with. So I hope that answered the question.
May I?
Go ahead, Linda.
Yes. So one thing that I think is really shows the governor's duplicity here is that, if he is so concerned about the horrendous nature of genital mutilation surgery, which is really what it is, gender mutilation surgery on minors, he should be equally horrified by the idea of puberty blockers followed by opposite sex hormones, which is a widespread treatment. And we know that this is going on. Almost every child that is assigned puberty blockers goes directly to opposite sex hormones. virtually none decide to undo the whole process. And this is called gender affirming care. It is gender destroying care. This is the road to chemical castration. Virtually all of these young people become permanently sterilized. Why isn't he horrified by that? If he's horrified by surgery, he should be horrified by that. This is a phony posturing by the governor, and I think we need to be very alert to watching that he's trying to divide the Republican possibility of Republicans at the State House, some of them peeling off and not voting for an override because he's thrown this bone out there that really essentially does nothing. We should not be fooled by this. This bill needs to go into effect, and the state, the General Assembly, House and Senate need to override his veto.
Thank you, Linda. Well, we're going to wrap this up for today, and I want to thank everyone who joined. I do want to give a couple of announcements. Protect Ohio Children has identified social emotional learning as one of our, if not the top priority that we're focused on to eradicate from schools in Ohio, because of just all of these things that we talk about here are actually coming in through social emotional learning courses. And so also because of that, we are holding and working with Marcia Metzger of Parents on the Level. She and I are doing a monthly webinar, much like this one that we're participating in now. The first webinar you can find on our YouTube channel, Protect Ohio Children YouTube, and that'll give you the first explanation about the most widely used social emotional learning curriculum in the country, which is Second Step. We invite you to, and everyone who participated here today will be invited to our next social emotional learning webinar, Exposing SEL, on Monday, January 15th. This is such a complex strategy from the left that it's going to take several webinars to really get into the weeds and the details of this horrific curriculum that's in Ohio schools. Also, we want to remind you that we receive anonymous tips from whistleblowers and have been for a few years now. We put out a monthly report that will come out next week of those anonymous tips that have come to us. You can send tips to us at tips@protectohiochildren.net. We keep all of the people that send them to us anonymous. They're never revealed. You can watch us, as I said before, on the YouTube channel, Protect Ohio Children. And also, one of the best ways you can actively engage with us is if you can join on Facebook our private groups. We have about 4,000 people in those groups. There's a group for Protect Ohio Children North, Central, and South. And you can ask your questions, share information, and see what others are posting in those private Facebook groups. Our next meeting, we will meet with this webinar process that we're using here today, monthly on the first Friday of every month. And our next meeting will be Friday, February 2nd. We hope you'll join us. We hope that you will stay engaged. Looking at this slide and just recapping, we want you to call your state representatives and senators to override Governor DeWine's veto. Also, second, if you look at our website on the homepage, the sex ed audit, the summary that POC and Mission America has done is right on the homepage. You can check to see if your district is compliant. And if it's not compliant, these are things you can talk to your school district about at your school board meeting. And then lastly, Jonathan, Cathy, and Darbi have given very specific issues about specific school districts where action is happening right now by parents and concerned taxpayers. It's never been more important to protect children from radical materials in the schools, and it's our duty to get involved. We hope we'll see you again next month on February 2nd. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm gonna shut it off. And get out of here. Okay.